Welcome to Deep Dive. In this episode, we look into the ecology of souls. This is from the book by Joshua Cutchin, Ecology of Souls, a new mythology of death in the paranormal.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place where we take those subjects you're curious about, wade through all the info, and pull out the really fascinating bits.
And you've definitely sent us down an interesting rabbit hole this time.
Yeah, we're looking at Joshua Cutchin's book, Ecology of Souls, a new mythology of death and the paranormal.
And Cutchin, he pulls from everywhere, doesn't he? Paranormal accounts, folklore, myths, even NDE research.
Exactly. So our mission today is to see what connections pop up when we look at all this stuff together.
Well, the thing that jumps out right away is Cutchin's big question. Are we seeing lots of different weird things, ghosts, aliens, fairies, whatever? Or is there maybe something linking them all?
And that link he's exploring is death and the soul.
Pretty much. Our ideas about death and what might happen to, well, the human soul.
Okay, let's dive in. One thing that grabbed me early on was this idea from the 14s.
Charles Fort's followers, the collectors of the strange.
Right. And Cutchin mentions they have this hunch, maybe all the unexplained stuff is basically one giant ghost story.
Which is a pretty wild idea, but he gives examples, right?
Yeah, he does. He points out these overlaps that seem, well, odd at first.
Like dead relatives showing up during alien abductions.
Exactly. And then you've got the old folklore linking fairies with the dead, especially in Western Europe.
The whole changeling thing, maybe? Fairies taking people going to the fairy realm.
Could be. And even cryptids, like Bigfoot or Nessie, sometimes showing up right before someone dies, like an omen.
So when you line those up, it does make you think, doesn't it? Maybe there is a connection we're missing.
Which leads us right to the title, Ecology of Souls. What exactly does Cutchin mean by that?
Okay, so the core idea of the ecology of souls is that maybe these paranormal entities, fairies, aliens, some cryptids, aren't totally separate things. Instead, they might be different parts of a bigger ecology. And this ecology is all tangled up with death and souls.
So not just ghosts being souls, but other things too.
Yeah, it's broader, includes things like psychopomps.
The soul guys, like Charon in Greek myth.
Exactly, guides for the dead. But also ideas about having multiple souls, the influence of ancestors, and just the whole collective human dead. It's a way of tying it all together.
Okay, let's talk ghosts then. Because the usual idea is just, ghosts are souls of the dead. Simple.
Right, that's the popular view. But Cutchin asks, is it really that simple? Does it explain everything we hear about hauntings?
Probably not. So what are the alternatives he explores?
Well, there's the stone tape theory, the idea that places like buildings or even rocks can somehow record events.
Like a psychic recording that replays.
Kinda, yeah. Under the right conditions, you might see or hear it. It's debated, obviously, but it's out there.
Okay, what else?
Then there's the idea that maybe they're not human souls at all. Maybe they're demons or some other entity just pretending to be the deceased.
Ooh, creepy?
Definitely. Or maybe ghosts or time slips. Just brief glimpses into the past playing out.
And Cutchin points out some really weird stuff too, doesn't he? Like ghosts appearing in two places at once.
Yeah, or wearing clothes from the wrong time period. Or having objects that didn't even exist when they were alive.
And the Walter Gibson thing.
Yeah.
Seeing his own fictional character, the Shadow, that's bizarre.
It absolutely is. It really messes with the simple ghost equals soul idea.
And these aren't just stories, right? He talks about physical effects.
Right. This is where it gets really interesting, blurring the lines between mind and body. He mentions Archbishop Laurentius dreaming he was attacked and waking up with actual whip marks.
Wow.
And a Scottish woman dreaming she was punched, then waking up bleeding with loose teeth. It challenges that modern idea that mind and body are totally separate things.
This almost sounds like it could connect to Carl Jung's ideas, the collective unconscious.
It does have that feel, yeah. Jung's theory was basically that all humans share this deep unconscious level filled with universal symbols and themes, archetypes he called them.
So these images repeat across cultures, even without direct contact.
That was Jung's idea. So maybe the imagery in paranormal encounters isn't just from our heads, but bubbles up from the shared collective head.
Like John Mack suspected with alien abductions.
Yeah.
That they were archetypes made real.
Exactly. Mack, the UFO researcher, thought something similar might be happening. When you see these patterns repeating everywhere, it's a compelling thought.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit to near-death experiences, NDEs. Cutchin prefers death experiences, right? Why is that?
Yeah, that's a key point. Near death can be a bit weak. Many people reporting these weren't just close to death.
They were actually gone.
Clinically dead, yeah. Heart stopped, not breathing. Sometimes for, 10, 15 minutes or more, according to medical records. So death experiences is arguably more accurate.
And NDE-like stuff can happen even when someone isn't dying.
That's right. Which also challenges the idea that it's just the brain freaking out.
Which is the common explanation, isn't it? The dying brain hypothesis.
It is, but Cutchin pushes back. He points out, like we said, these experiences happen when people aren't near death. Plus, they're surprisingly consistent across cultures.
Even when they contradict what the person believes about the afterlife.
Yeah, like the Zuni people. Their traditional beliefs don't really include bright lights or seeing dead relatives, but they report those things in NDEs anyway.
Huh.
And research even shows that knowing about NDEs beforehand actually makes you less likely to have a typical one, which suggests it's not just, learned behavior or cultural expectation.
And the brain activity thing, flat EEG.
Right. Peter Fenwick's research found NDEs reported during cardiac arrest often happen when the EEG is flat. Minimal brain activity. So it's hard to pin it just on the brain.
It's amazing how much research there actually is now.
Yeah.
It wasn't always taken seriously.
Not at all. It was fringe for a long time. But books like Raymond Moody's Life After Life in the 70s really kicked things off.
And then academics started looking into it.
Yeah, Moody, Grayson, Kenneth Ring, they brought it into universities.
Yeah.
But a big turning point was 2001.
What happened then?
The Lancet, a top medical journal, published Pim van Lommel's study on NDEs in cardiac arrest patients. That gave it a lot more credibility in the medical world.
And Cutchin sees NDEs as part of a bigger picture, otherworld journeys.
Exactly. He frames them as one type of this broader category. Think about folklore tales of trips to fairyland.
Or spiritual visions, psychedelic trips.
Dreams, even alien abductions. They all share this theme of journeying to another reality. It's interesting, though. He notes it's rare for someone to report both an NDE and an abduction.
Suggesting maybe they're tapping into something similar.
Perhaps, yeah. Different doors to the same complex.
So what are the common features of these NDE journeys? What do people typically report?
Okay, well, based on the accounts Cutchin gathers, it often starts with a sound, buzz or roar, something like that. And then this feeling of being pulled really fast through a dark space. People call it a tunnel, a void, a well. Lots of descriptions.
And where does it lead?
Almost always to this incredibly bright, but somehow not painful light. It's described as beautiful, loving, welcoming.
Like pure love.
That's a very common description, yes. And then, passing into the light, they often find themselves in a beautiful place, a garden, a meadow. Super vibrant colors.
And their senses change?
Yeah, heightened senses are frequently reported. Vision becomes incredibly sharp, maybe seeing more colors than usual, sometimes even 360-degree vision.
Wow.
Time often disappears or feels totally different. And overwhelming feelings of peace, love, well-being.
And they meet beings.
Often, yes. Beings of light is a common term, and people tend to interpret them through their own beliefs. So Christians might see Jesus or angels, others might see different figures.
The life review happens sometimes too, right?
Yes, the life review is a known element, though Cutchin doesn't go into massive detail on it in this section. But the feeling of being home is also very strong, a sense of return.
Now, you mentioned psychopomps earlier, the guides. Let's circle back to them. What's their role in this ecology of souls?
Right, psychopomps. So they're guides for the dead, essentially. Important distinction. They're usually not death gods themselves, more like neutral facilitators.
Ferryman escorts.
Exactly. Helping the soul transition. They kind of mediate between our world and the underworld or the afterlife, whatever you call it.
Okay, and Cutchin puts them in categories. Animals first.
Yeah, animals are huge as psychopomps across cultures. Deer, for example, often seen as bridging worlds linked to Odin in Norse Germanic lore.
And dogs. I feel like I've heard that one.
Very common. Lots of stories of dogs sensing death. They're guides in Indo-European myths, Mesoamerican ones too, like for the Aztecs, crossing the river of the dead with a dog companion.
What about birds?
Birds too, symbolizing the soul flying up to heaven. Fenwick's research mentions birds appearing near the dying. Shamans might take bird forms to travel. Owls are big too, often linked to death goddesses or seen as omens.
Okay, second category, humans. Ancestors specifically.
Right. Respect for ancestors is almost universal, isn't it? Believing they still influence us, guide us.
Even if it's not formal ancestor worship, people feel that connection.
Totally. And in some traditions, like Ifa in Africa, ancestors directly guide new souls. Or Pacific Islanders believing dead children wait at a crossroads to help others.
Makes sense. Then deities. We mentioned Hermes.
Hermes is the classic Greek psychopomp, but also Persephone, queen of the underworld, Anubis in Egypt, guiding souls to judgment, Thoth overseeing things. Even some Buddhist bodhisattvas have a kind of guiding role.
Fourth category, folk figures. He mentions fairies here, but we'll get back to him.
Yeah, that's a big one later.
And the last category was natural phenomena. Is that like rivers or mountains acting as guides?
He doesn't detail it as much in this bit, but yeah, the implication is there. The landscape itself plays a role. Underworlds beneath water, celestial journeys. The environment is part of the transition.
Got it. Let's talk about the soul itself then. How does Cutchin define it for this discussion?
He gives it pretty broad, basically any part of our consciousness that might survive death. He mentions the Greek idea of psyche being foundational in the West, but highlights how other cultures, like in Africa or Siberia, believe in multiple souls within one person.
Multiple souls. Interesting. And the size thing, souls being tiny.
Yeah, Scottish folklore has tales of midge-sized souls, and it's weirdly echoed in some NDEs where people feel their consciousness shrinking, or even in some of John Mack's alien abduction regressions.
That shrinking idea connects to wandering souls and shape-shifting.
Exactly, this widespread belief that the soul can leave the body, especially during sleep or illness.
Like the Welsh story of the soul leaving as a mouse.
Right, and they're believed to take many forms: lizards, hares, cats, birds, bees, even tiny little people, or storm clouds, whirlwinds.
So it connects to OBEs, out-of-body experiences, and God's shape-shifting.
Yeah, like Odin changing form in Norse myth. It's all part of this fluid idea of consciousness and its potential forms.
What about doppelgangers? Phantasms of the living. How do they fit?
Doppelgangers are basically ghostly doubles of people who are still alive. Cutchin gives examples: poets seeing themselves, that creepy Okinawan story, the professor guided home by his double.
And they're seen as warnings?
Often, yeah. Maybe from the subconscious, or a higher self, or that collective unconscious again. Or if death follows, maybe it shows the soul loosening its connection to the body.
So could they be part of the ecology too? If souls take animal forms linked to psychopomps, and doubles sometimes act as guides.
That's the question Cutchin raises. Are they another manifestation within the soul ecology? It's intriguing.
Let's talk location. Where's the afterlife supposed to be? Not always up or down.
Right. That's a common idea. God's above, dead below, but it's definitely not universal.
Where else?
The Milky Way is a big one for indigenous cultures. Distant places on Earth. Stellar underworlds even, mixing up and down.
And Christianity changed things. Heaven temporary, underworld becoming hell.
Over time, yeah. And the idea of underworlds underwater that gives context for mermaid myths, sea monsters. Cutchin even points out a possible old link between the words soul and sea.
Fascinating. Okay, now let's really dig into fairies. Cutchin argues there's a deep link between fairies and the dead.
Oh, absolutely. This is a huge part of the book. The folklore is just soaked in death connections.
Like Persephone being queen of the fairy.
Exactly. And the Orpheus myth, retold as Sir Orfeo rescuing his wife from the fairy king, caves seen as entries to the underworld, and fairy homes.
But later ideas saw them as nature spirits, right? Elementals.
Yeah, Theosophy pushed that view, but folklorists like MacEdward Leach suggested belief in fairies actually grew out of beliefs about ghosts.
How did that progression work?
Leach saw it as the dead become animated spirits who can appear in different forms, eventually leading to the idea of a separate world, fairyland.
And Lewis Spence just flat out said Celtic fae are dead souls.
Pretty much, yeah. Catherine Briggs tweaked it slightly, suggesting some in fairyland maybe shouldn't be dead, hinting at something more complex.
And the Celts really doubled down on this connection.
Hugely. Hobbes called fairies spirits and ghosts. Aubrey agreed. Robert Kirk wrote about magicians talking to ghosts and spirits, or as they commonly call them, the fairies or fairy folk. Used the terms almost interchangeably.
Are there stories illustrating this?
Loads. Like an Irishman seeing his dead friends in the fairy queen's court, or fairies, including dead neighbors, helping build a wall, then tearing it down later showing they play by different rules.
Even symbols. Like a kneading trough meaning decay.
Yeah, symbolic links too, and it's not just Celtic.
And Norse and Germanic too.
Right. Dwarves sometimes equated with the dead, the draugr, the undead, possibly related to elves. Even that custom of putting criminals' hair and nails in mounds to be tormented by spirits, maybe that evolved into bad fairies or devils.
So sometimes fairyland and the afterlife are basically the same place.
Or fairyland is like a poetic way of talking about the afterlife. Like the Breton girl marrying a dead priest in fairyland. And encounters with both fairies and the dead often happen on specific holidays, liminal times.
And the places themselves, Avalon, Tecwyn, associated with souls, even if the names don't scream land of the dead.
Precisely. Like Avalon, where Arthur went, or Tectwyn in Ireland, home of Dawn, a death god and fairy king. It's all interwoven. Think of afterlife crossroads, like in Plato, symbolizing judgment.
And Christians even imagined a spot in purgatory for fairies.
Yeah, a sort of third way for them.
What about the food taboo? Not eating in fairyland.
Ah, yeah, that's a classic. Eat the food and you can't go back to the living world.
Like Thomas the Rhymer.
Exactly. It binds you to the other world, makes you part of it. Especially strong in places like Brittany, where the fairy dead link is explicit. Eat what the dead offer and you're stuck.
Dreams seem important here too. Gateways.
Definitely. Dreams seen as ways to connect with the higher self, linked to prophecy. Think of the Aboriginal dreaming a timeless otherworld, much like fairyland.
NDEs are often compared to dreams, but more real.
Yeah, NDs usually say they're way more vivid, but waking paranormal stuff sometimes has that same weird dreamlike logic. High strangeness.
Kenneth Ring thought those disjointed bits were actually part of the experience.
He did, yeah. Signifiers of something truly numinous, otherworldly, and fairies in folklore often controlled sleep the Sandman, La Dormette. Plus, witnesses falling asleep during encounters.
Yeats wondered if fairies were human souls being transformed.
Human souls in the crucible, yeah. A powerful image.
Cutchin even mentions a near-death fairyland. What's that?
It's blurring the lines even more. He gives an example of a drowned priest appearing in a vision explicitly called fairyland. Suggests a direct overlap between dying and the fairy realm.
And other themes connect too. Love, music, healing.
Yeah, love and sexuality pop up seductive demons, fairy brides, the dead returning to have kids, rare spirit coitus in NDEs, the death bride archetype.
La petite mort.
Exactly. Music is huge with fairies too. And sometimes encounters lead to healing, gaining knowledge, spiritual awakenings, even joining the clergy. But not always good post-fairy depression is mentioned too.
Monuments, mounds, stone circles seem key physically.
Absolutely. Fairies strongly linked to burial mounds, stone circles, suggest these places house the dead and were fairy portals or homes.
Even non-burial sites could get these associations.
Yeah, over time, especially in Europe. Think of sacred trees too, believed to hold souls in Egypt, Hinduism. It points to this landscape filled with an ecology of souls.
Maybe not just human souls.
Right. Theosophy suggests souls in almost everything, part of reincarnation. So an ecology of human and non-human souls, maybe?
What about how fairies looked? Goblin face?
Often described that way, yeah. Male fairies with big, goggling eyes, skinny faces, thin bodies. One account calls a nest small, wrinkled button eyes. A modern Scot compared them to bog people.
And water spirits evolving from souls.
Yeah, into mermaids, maybe? With dolphins as psychopomps. And being seriously ill, taken, linked to shamanic initiation and NDEs. Folklore even warns against interrupting fairy dances, maybe hinting at disrupting travel between worlds.
Being taken fairy abductions seems like a major theme.
Huge. Fairy raids, these kidnapping parades, especially in Scotland. Lots of accounts of people vanishing, supposedly taken by fairies for long periods.
And leaving offerings could make you a spirit of the land.
That was a belief, yeah. And people literally moved houses to avoid blocking fairy paths, believing illness or death would follow if they didn't.
Sacrifices too, like the Scandinavian sacrifice to the elves.
Right. And offerings to Greek Nereids were the same as those for the dead. Stories of fairies or ghosts diverting travelers might echo beliefs about soul paths. Apparitions beckoning you could relate to navigating the afterlife.
So how did people defend themselves?
Lots of ways in Europe. Fire was big, against fairies and ghosts. Iron, salt, turning clothes inside out, carrying rowan wood or bread.
Running water and thresholds were barriers.
Often, yeah. Fairies couldn't cross them easily. Symbolic boundaries, perhaps?
Cutchin revisits that extinct race idea for fairies, but twists it.
Yeah, the idea of fairies were memories of earlier hidden peoples. It's problematic. Cutchin suggests maybe it's not the people as they lived, but their ghosts. The extinct race ghost hypothesis.
How would that explain fairy traits?
Well, maybe dwelling underground, being smaller, if souls shrink, darker skin like bog bodies, abductions, ghost behavior, fear of iron, ghost repellent. It reframes it.
Okay, the last big fairy section connects them directly to death rolls, omens, doubles, reincarnation, psychopomps.
Right, cementing the link. If fairies are older ghosts, maybe them fading away symbolizes souls finally moving on.
And specific fairy death omens.
Loads. The Irish Banshee, obviously. The Welsh Grack Ribbon. German figures like Die Weiße Frau. Even knocking sounds meaning death or transition.
Doubles, too, like co-walkers or Cherokee Little People. Omens or detached souls.
Seen as both, yeah. And actual fairy funerals witnessed by people. Robert Kirk reappearing after death. Changelings looking sickly.
And kids being switched with dying fairies.
Yeah, dark stuff. Beliefs about souls leaving through the mouth, fairies naming newborns, souls entering the body, all tied to fairies and mortality.
Animals linked to fairies, like owls and bees, also linked to death.
Often, yes. And psychopomp animals like horses connected to fae folk. Even in modern accounts hinting at fairies as psychopomps. Peter Pan may be a cultural echo.
And Celtic gods linked to both fairies and the afterlife.
Annie Dawn, Menanan McLear, and even the Virgin Mary sometimes taking on fairy as psychopomp aspects. It's all incredibly tangled.
Let's shift to altered states of consciousness, ASCs. How are they relevant here?
Well, Fortons are interested because they often have that weird dreamlike logic. ASCs cover everything from OBEs and fairyland visits to alien abductions.
Hypnosis is used in ufology, but it's tricky.
Very. Risk of false memories, implanted ideas. Cutchin mentions past life regression too, even scripts for contacting the dead via hypnosis.
But he focuses more on psychedelics.
Yeah, and their effect on the brain. Maybe they lower our mental filters, let us perceive other channels, like the Hindu idea of Maya, the veil of illusion.
Jung thought we're always dreaming underneath waking consciousness.
He did. And dreams themselves can be prophetic, even death omens. Cultures have used entheogens for ages. Divination, healing, talking to the dead.
Like the black drink in the US, lotus in Egypt, soma in Hinduism.
Exactly. And there's a long folk connection between psychedelics, especially mushrooms, and fairies. Victorian England, Breton Corgans, Chinese shape-shifting mushrooms.
Terence McKenna talked about meeting elves on DMT.
Famously, yes. Though how much his writing influenced later reports is debated. The pineal gland, the third eye, potentially making DMT. It all feeds into this.
Cutchin even wonders if weird lights at encounters could stimulate DMT, leading to co-created experiences.
It's speculation, but it fits the model fairies, UFOs, cryptids as potentially co-created within this ecology, triggered by ASCs.
And there are strong parallels between NDEs and psychedelic trips.
Striking parallels? Yes. Both are ASCs. Both often feature ego death, losing your sense of self.
What else? Sound light.
Yeah, buzzing or ringing sounds reported in both. Intense light, vivid colors, sometimes beyond normal spectrum in NDEs. Psychedelic experiences often described as more real than real.
Weird landscapes. Time distortion.
Subterranean feelings, caves, domes in both DMT and LSD reports. Otherworldly gardens in NDEs. Time stretching out is common in both. Feeling like an animal, but therianthropy happens occasionally.
Healing potential.
Yep.
Increased paranormal belief.
Psychedelics studied for healing neural pathways. NDErs report positive changes, and yes, psychedelic users often report more paranormal beliefs and experiences. Cutchin shares a mushroom trip story that sounds very NDE-like, white sphere, owl woman figure, rebirth.
McKenna saw the psychedelic realm as maybe this ecology of souls, the departed.
That was his view, yeah. A nearby dimension teeming with intelligence, maybe the dead, DMT letting you peek across the veil. Whitley Strieber had similar thoughts about rebirth into timelessness.
And ego death is key to both.
McKenna thought so. The death of the ego, suggesting maybe not much of our everyday self carries over.
Shamanism seems crucial too, bridging worlds.
Absolutely. Shamans use ASCs for healing, spirit communication, altering reality. Dead shamans, often sources of wisdom. Spirit helpers, maybe aspects of the shaman's own soul.
Initiation involves ASCs, maybe entheogens, sensory deprivation.
Often, yeah. Symbolic death and rebirth. Luce and Ring compared shamanic initiation to NDEs and UFO contact, same core themes.
Shamans fly to the other world, like fairyland.
Similar descriptions, caves, dim light, weird time, even carnal relations with spirit helpers sometimes, lost time experiences echo shamanic journeys, dismemberment themes, though rarer in fairy lore than shamanism.
UFO implants like shamanic objects.
Cutchin draws that parallel. Objects installed by spirits during initiation, The Osiris myth is a shamanic symbol, ayahuasca visions echoing it. Dance is a tech for jumping worlds, shape-shifting.
So maybe our modern fear leads us to categorize encounters, demons, ghosts, fairies, aliens, when they're all invitations to communion.
That's the provocative suggestion, that we're maybe missing the point by putting them in boxes based on fear or limited frameworks.
Then there are window areas, paranormal hotspots.
Yeah, places with lots of weird activity concentrated, UFOs near ancient sites, Australia, Fiji, harder to pin down in Africa, but an example in Montenegro.
Northwestern Europe seems full of them, especially burial mounds.
Definitely. Bruna Boyne Newgrange in Ireland, a classic otherworld portal. Building burials on older sacred sites. Icelandic ring forts still linked to Huldufolk.
Why unexcavated sites linked to fairies, more than just bones?
Maybe. Astronomical alignments, earth energies. And these places often have ghosts, black dogs, weird lights, sounds, smells, the whole package.
What about U.S. monuments, the mound builders?
Massive earthworks, similarities to old world sites, mounds, construction, even stadium seating. Adena, Hopewell cultures focused heavily on death. Tales of giant skeletons found in mounds fueled weird theories.
Hence to ancient aliens.
Cutchin sees it as cyclical. Belief in advanced ancients pops up again and again. Disc worship, UFOs.
Yeah.
Maybe a long history of seeing weird stuff in the sky. But he warns against literal ancient aliens.
Maybe it's modern gods, not ancient aliens.
Kripal's quote, yeah, suggests we need to follow the death roads to understand these places.
Limestone is common in these monuments. Any significance?
Yeah, limestone's porous, maybe absorbs, releases energy, electromagnetic or psychic. Illinois folklore links limestone quarries to hauntings. Polynesian kakamora linked to limestone.
And layering materials like orgone accumulators.
The similarity is noted. Wilhelm Reich's orgone energy idea. Maybe ancient spirit interaction ideas are better than modern ET theories for understanding this stuff.
Which brings us to death roads and ley lines. What's the idea here?
That monuments maybe tap into existing weirdness in the landscape, not create it. Alignments of sacred sites noticed long ago led to the blue lane idea, straight paths connecting them.
Like energy currents, detectable by dowsing.
That's the theory. Ancients built on these lines, maybe spirits travel along them. Mazes near burials might have been to stop spirits wandering these paths.
Folklore has processions of the dead on specific routes. The Wild Hunt.
Exactly. The Wild Hunt blurs ghosts, non-human spirits, sometimes demons. Fairy paths, too, blocking them causes trouble. Illness, people moved houses.
Sounds of invisible armies. Ghost lights.
All part of it. The Wild Hunt, led by figures like Odin or Herne the Hunter, Jung dreamt of it. The church tried to demonize it. Hard to separate from fairy raids, sky travel, storms, jangling bridles, goddesses like Perchta linked to fairy queens and the hunt.
Modern abduction accounts echo the Wild Hunt.
Some parallels, like Travis Walton. It all connects. Dead appear, fairies appear, ETs appear. Some say the hunt was just misidentified UFOs.
And watching the dead at churchyards.
Yeah.
Seeing doubles of the doomed.
Yeah, another tradition. And prohibitions against waking sleepers whose souls are wandering maybe influenced ideas about witches' Sabbaths, linked to Diana or Hecate, shamanic flight, OBEs.
So Divro linked death roads, the hunt, Leyland lines.
Yeah. Ancient roads connecting sacred burial sites. Lays as earth forces affecting consciousness, inspiring folklore. Watkins straight tracks, dowsing for power centers, examples worldwide.
Persinger's tectonic strain theory, magnetic anomalies causing ASCs.
Right, magnetic fields near fault lines, ley lines inducing trance-like states, so maybe death raids and lays are the same, paths for the dead, tapping into our mortality.
John Keel's window areas linked to magnetic spots too.
Yeah, UFO sightings and patterns around them, maybe inspired by orthoteny site alignments. Cutchin shares a modern UFO synchronicity story near a window area after a death.
Roads themselves influencing things. New bypasses causing sightings fatalities.
Devereaux noted that possibility. And Crossroads' universal symbol of transition, often execution burial sites, linking death and liminal space again.
Cutchin ends by critiquing materialism, saying it misses something.
Yeah, argues it can't really account for all these persistent spiritual beliefs and experiences. Suggests maybe we're poorer in spirit, disconnected from this ecology of souls.
And returns to the big question, where do UFOs fit in?
Right. The central puzzle. UFOs seem paradoxical, physical, but defying physics, manipulating time-space. Hard to define.
He talks about disclosure disclaimers, limits of the ETH.
Criticizes the extraterrestrial hypothesis fans for ignoring parapsychology, myth, folklore. Suggests maybe spirits or gods are piloting craft, adapting to our expectations.
Like fairy artifacts or religious relics being anomalous objects.
Exactly. And compares fairy descriptions, small big eyes, to gray aliens. Taller supervising aliens like fairy kings queens, implants like fairy elfshot, Morgellons like fairy curses.
Abductions mirroring ASCs, shamanism, fairy lore, inverted clothes.
All these parallels. Valley noted UFO appearances evolve with our expectations. Cutchin isn't saying aliens are fairies, but that it's all interconnected. Maybe ancient stargazing linked stars to the afterlife.
Leads to the idea of a celestial afterlife. UFO religions.
Humans look skyward, unreachable, sun moon as psychopumps. Maybe the sun collected souls. Indigenous traditions link ancestors to stars. Mormonism's Kolob.
Theosophy influenced early ufology.
Yeah.
Contacting ETs in trance.
Yeah, like Swedenborg. Early contactees like Angelucci saw UFOs spiritually. Gabriel Green thought his dead wife joined a mothership. It was spiritual from the start.
Cutchin calls for a prisca ufologia, recognizing the paranormal roots.
Yeah, argues modern disclosure ignores history, says the original ufology was paranormal spirituality and death were key. UFOs may be tapping into our unconscious concern with death, Halperin. Death is the ultimate alien.
Repeaters, people experiencing all sorts of paranormal stuff alongside UFOs.
Right. Not just UFOs, but Bigfoot, fairies, ghosts, psi events, time slips, OBEs, poltergeists, a whole constellation of weirdness.
UFOs triggering psychic abilities or poltergeist activity.
Some cases suggest that. Raises the question, which comes first? Are experiencers already sensitive?
And back to NDE parallels and abductions.
Levitation feeling like dying.
Yeah, abductees feeling dead during levitation.
Yeah.
Tunnels again, Andreassen's silvery tube, Andreas' speeding tunnel. Kripal's mystical insight to light applying to both.
Bright light almost universal in abductions. Initial feeling of death. Very common, yes. Even historical links between bright skylights and death omens.
Otherworldly landscapes overlap too, but maybe different flavors.
NDEs often peaceful, beautiful. Abductions sometimes sterile, medical, even hellish. But NDEs can be hellish too. Ancient beliefs linking death to Mars. Abductees shown star maps, told origins in space.
Missing time again. Maybe otherworld time. Or interacting with non-linear beings.
Cutchin explores that slowed perception, consciousness manipulation, Child's theory of music-like sounds controlling craft via consciousness, aliens speaking in sing-song voices like angels or fairies. Historical accounts link metallic sounds, light-winged figures to fairies.
Life reviews less common in abductions, replaced by meetings, messages.
Seems so. Meetings with aliens paralleling judgment ideas. But avoid simple equations, grays, demons, etc. Light beings from NDEs sometimes reported on ships. Aliens often humanoid, telepathic, like NDE beings.
Abductees identifying beings as dead loved ones or religious figures.
Some accounts like that, yeah. The man captured by trolls meeting God on a craft. Raelian creation story. It's hard to separate UFOs, ASCs, fairy tales, Fatima involved buzzing, fairy-like BVM, lost memory maybe indicating reality shifts.
Similarities maybe arise from co-creation within the ecology of souls, shaped by our expectations.
That's Cutchin's suggestion. And he hints the after effects, healing, abilities, awakenings, poltergeists might be the real point, maybe for a future deep dive.
He addresses materialist dismissals, hallucinations, sleep paralysis.
Acknowledges them, yeah. Mentions Marsh's data linking stimulus levels to negative sleep paralysis or positive OBE entities. Wonders if New Age vibrations relate to electrical stimuli. Maybe sleep paralysis and OBEs are on a continuum.
And synchronicity. Cleland's owl, mother's death, timely email.
Right. Synchronicity is seen as meaningful affirmations, increase after psychedelics, NDEs. UFO encounters also followed by synchronicities, psychic predictions.
Poltergeist and psi abilities as unexpected after effects.
Yes, documented increases in both among abductees. Objects moving, noises. Doesn't fit a simple ETH model. Older cosmologies with spirits might fit better. Raises questions. Ghosts causing it. Experiencer awakening. Both.
Internal changes too, mirroring NDs.
Big time. Increased intelligence, intuition, creativity, less fear of death, more purpose. Psychic abilities, developing telepathy, remote viewing, medical intuition, more spirituality, empathy, love, planetary concern. Free ease research confirms increases after UAP contact and NDEs.
Suggests the encounters themselves are spiritual, linked to mystical experience, shamanic initiation.
Exactly. Bullard noted the initiation parallels. Trauma, sometimes a catalyst. Bike accident, NDE channeling. Asthma, OBE, UFOs. Sickness, UFO contact, quasi abilities.
Like shamans getting spirit communication. UFO contact involving channeling, downloads.
The parallel is drawn. Eileen Arnold's automatic writing after a sighting.
Medical exams and rescue scenarios. Feeling dead or injured.
Abductees reporting exams, sometimes feeling they were revived by beings. Third-person perspective during regression, seeing surgery. Rare accounts of being chased, dismembered, symbolic shamanic echoes. A metaphysical procedure with a small soul and glowing liquid.
Implant again. Strieber communicating via his capians. With visitors and his dead wife.
Yeah, it raises huge questions about what those implants really are, if Strieber's account holds.
And finally, apocalyptic messages replacing life reviews. Warnings about the planet.
Seems common. Messages about humanity's future, Earth's health, Adamski on atomic weapons, Angelucci's comet, Andreas and Luca's warnings, Kowalczyk's destruction dream, Sanders' mission to save humanity.
Abductees feeling chosen for missions, called to change things.
Recurring theme, yeah. Internal and external changes needed. Warnings about environmental damage, other races destroying themselves.
Wow. So wrapping up this deep dive into Cutchin's Ecology of Souls,
Yeah.
it really does weave everything together, doesn't it?
It really does. Ghosts, fairies, aliens, the dead, maybe not separate boxes, but part of this interconnected ecology.
And those recurring patterns in NDE showing up in abductions, the deep fairy death connection in folklore, ASCs as potential doorways.
It paints a picture where the lines just blur, suggesting a deeper reality underneath, tied intimately to death and the soul.
Makes you think maybe our usual way of looking at the universe is, well, too narrow.
That's the big takeaway, I think. Could our modern framework be hiding a more connected reality, where maybe the dead, fairies, aliens, they're all facets of this one big phenomenon, an ecology of souls?
It definitely changes how you might think about life, death, and all the mysteries out there.
A lot to ponder, for sure.
A truly compelling thought. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you'll keep exploring these fascinating ideas on your own.